Good afternoon, and welcome to the Demolition Daily livestream. I'm your host, Mark Anthony. For those of you that were also over on the Instagram live earlier today, where I was talking about Instagram impact, same rules apply. We're going to put the video up from that live stream onto YouTube. It'll be unlisted, but if you do want to see it and learn how we've got our following on Instagram up to 113,000 people around the world, we'll make that available for you. There's also a guide that goes with it, also free of charge. So if you would like to see that, just drop us an email with your email address. You can see my email address going across the bottom of the screen there. We'd be lovely. We'd be more than happy to share that with you. Got a couple of points that I will come back to a bit later on, because we have got a few other bits and pieces going on. But if you were here yesterday, you'll know that I literally, before I came on air, the Construction Index news portal had just put up a new article on that they entitled Uncertain Outlook for Demolition. And we do look very, very quickly at the people that make, or the companies that make up the UK top 10 in terms of turnover. At the time that I went live yesterday, I hadn't had a chance to read the article. I just literally did a very quick scan, but I've now had a chance to take a closer look at it. I've got to be honest, I didn't... in the nicest possible way, I didn't learn a great deal from it. There's a bit more insight into how much some of these companies are making at the upper echelons. For example, the total turnover for the top 20 demolition firms in the UK grew by 6% in 2019, from 1.1 to 1.2 billion. But at the same time, pre-tax profits fell from 7%, fell just over 7% to 61.5 million. According to the Construction Index, that's actually the second time in a year, second year in a row, that profits have taken a tumble. In 2018, pre-tax profits of almost 77 million were recorded for the same 20 contractors. So that is a fairly sizable fall. Average profit margins have also fallen. 2 years ago, average pre-tax profit margin was 7.2%. This year, 5.3%. And I say this year, that's 2019, because obviously we're only halfway through the year. The Construction Index, or the writer there, David Taylor, who I've known for many years, made a big play about the fact that a lot of this was, you could lay the blame for all of this at the door of Brexit. And I'm sure that hasn't helped. There certainly has been a great deal of uncertainty in the market about just how the construction industry would go, how property market would go, housing, and various other bits and pieces. So I do think there is some truth there. Obviously, we've also had some political uncertainty in the UK as well, with the departure of Theresa May, and the subsequent election, and so on down the line. So all of that will have had an impact. But I think one of the things that struck me about reading the article in more depth is the fact that it's not, in my mind, it's not particularly indicative. And I tend to use football as an analogy quite a bit whenever I'm talking or writing. This top 20 it's like looking at the Premiership of the or the English Premier League, and saying that that's somehow representative of football as a whole. That, you know, the money that Man United and Manchester City and Arsenal and Liverpool and Spurs have got in their coffers is somehow replicated further down, all the way down through the Championship, League Two, right the way down to grassroots football, which we all know is a nonsense. So I'm hoping, we have got quite a few people watching at the moment, so I'd love to get your take on what you think the real story is further down the line, because I've written about this on a number of occasions. The fact that although nobody will admit it, and nobody likes to look at it in this way, we do seem to have a bit of a two-tier system here in the UK. And it's not necessarily a class thing, because I think some of the companies that I admire the most are actually not the very upper echelons. It's the ones that are bubbling just below that are working really hard to catch the big boys. But I'd be interested to get your take. This two-tier industry to which I refer, if you look at the top 20, and I'm not sure if I can do that. Have I still got it open? I may well have. Let's have a look. Yeah, the top 20 goes down to, let's have a look. I think Rodar are number 20. And a decent sized company, a decent company, and so on down the line. But are those figures that we're looking at there in any way indicative of what is actually happening in the UK demolition industry? And the reason I ask that, we publish, or Demolition News publishes, once every year we do our demolition directory, and it fluctuates, but by and large we estimate that there's probably between 500 and 600 demolition companies that are currently active here in the UK. Chances are, I mean, we've already lost a few as a result of the Brexit and the economic climate then. We've lost a couple at the beginning of this year as well. And chances are we will lose more as a result of the continued COVID lockdown. But what is very, very clear from our findings, and which is kind of replicated with what the Construction Index have said, is the fact that you've got these really big companies at the top, but then there's one hell of a fall off a bit further down the line. So you've got these companies that are turning over 20, 30, 50 million, and above even. You then go down the list and down the list and down the list. By the time you get to maybe the top 50, you're down to the ones and the 2 millions rather than the multi-millions. And different rules apply there. My guess is that the upper echelons tend to have their own pet developers and their pet clients who they work very, very hard to work alongside regularly. They protect them and they guard them. So we are talking competitive tendering, but there is a degree of an ongoing relationship there. Whereas I think that the further you go down that list, the more people are willing to take lower and lower and lower prices. And my feeling, looking at this, the average pre-tax profit margin among the top 20 is 5.3%. My guess and my belief is that's probably a hell of a lot lower the further you go down the list. Good morning, Scott Laird, all the way from the US. I'd be interested to know what sort of profit margins you guys are working on over there. Because, as I say, my feeling is the profit margins that we're seeing here are going to, or further down that line, are going to be a hell of a lot less than 5.3%. And it also runs deeper than that. Whereas the upper echelons, the Keltbraiths and the Eriths and the McGees and the DSMs that make up the very, very top tier of the UK demolition industry, and they, don't get me wrong, they've earned the right. They are very, very good companies, very diverse, very well organised, very well managed. I have no qualms about them whatsoever. They do what they do very, very well, and they are to be admired and they are to be emulated, ideally. But they are of a size now, and I would certainly count a couple of those as effectively blue chip companies in their own right. What they have is the size, the heft, just the financial wealth, I think, to do things in a different way. Like, they will have the ability to have their own in-house marketing department. They'll have their own in-house business development department, not just one guy chasing around and making lots of phone calls. We're talking entire departments here. You'll have a department that's dedicated entirely to keeping on top of legislation and health and safety. They will have training departments. A lot of them will do their own training in-house, all of which gives them the edge. But it's an edge that my personal feeling is quite possibly beyond the reach of maybe those that are at the bottom end of the middle of the of the market, if you like. So we do have a system that is very, very skewed, and I think what's interesting about that as well, and maybe that it's one of those chicken or egg situations, and I'm not entirely sure which way it works. But when you look at that top 20, most of that top 20 are members of the National Federation of Demolition Contractors. So you've got a lot of the rules and the guidance are being dictated by those at the very, very, very top, who have got the financial muscle and the strength in depth to be able to roll with any changes. So, for example, and I'll go back to, let's compare it to football again. If Manchester City or Liverpool decided that actually we're from here on in, we're going to change the rules. We're going to have I don't know, 12 men per side rather than the standard 11. We're going to do things in a slightly different way. But we've got the money to be able to do that. We can pay an extra wage. We can pay extra goal bonuses. So that's not a problem for us. And we would now like that to be applied right the way throughout the Football League, right the way down to the grassroots level, even down to school and football and college level. Now, while those companies at the top and those clubs at the top have got the financial muscle to be able to do that, has everyone? Could we're talking guidance here. Let's talk about guidance. If somebody, or if the NFDC or the companies that make up the NFDC decided that they were going to impose a new sort of regulation, and whatever it was going to cost a lot of money to impose, it was going to cost a lot of money to apply to and to adhere to. Those at the top, those that have actually set those rules in motion, have got the financial muscle to make that happen. Those a little bit further down the line haven't. And those at the very bottom, those startup companies or those that just work in maybe a town or a city or a county, they don't have that financial muscle. And I think going back to the fact that we're talking about the Construction Index article here, the Construction Index is built for construction. It occasionally looks at demolition, but primarily my guess is because there's some advertising to be had and they like to mop that up once a year by turning their attention to that. And that's fair play. I don't think they're treading on my toes. I've got a lot of time for a lot of the guys at the Construction Index. But I don't think they're looking at the big picture. As I say, it's likening it to football yet again. It's like looking at the Premiership and saying that's the whole of that sport, and it really isn't. That really is why demolitionnews.com started. That's why the Demolition Magazine started. That's why we don't have any restrictions. We don't care if you're a member of the NFDC or the IDE or a member of nothing at all. If you're doing something good and exciting and interesting and unusual in the field of demolition, you're welcome. We don't care. We have no axe to grind. We have no affiliation with anyone. As far as we're concerned, if you do what you do properly and to the best of your ability, you're good enough for us. That isn't replicated in the wider industry. And even when you look at things like TV shows, and we get approached by a lot of TV companies here at Demolition News, primarily for advice on who is best to speak to. We try to share it around. I must admit, we do try to share it around and try and get involved some of the smaller companies and perhaps the lesser known companies. But when you think about what a TV company will actually want, it again plays to the strengths of those big companies. For one thing, a big company is quite likely to have somebody that is media focused and possibly media savvy and media trained, so that if a TV company wants to go and film a demolition, they've got somebody that they can dedicate to run alongside that TV company and make that happen. The same isn't possible at a smaller company. And also, you've got to think about the availability of work. If somebody phoned me up now and said, we want to phone, setting aside the coronavirus, somebody phoned me this afternoon and said, we desperately need to film some demolition in the next 3 days. Chances are my thoughts would turn immediately to a Keltbray or an Erith or a McGee or a DSM, because these guys have got 10, 20, 50 sites live at any given time. Whereas Fred Blogg's demolition, and if you actually exist, Fred, I do apologise, but Fred Blogg's demolition might not have any work for the next 3 months, particularly at the moment. So again, we're constantly skewing this message that the Premiership is somehow representative of the wider sector, and it really isn't. Not much more I can say about that, really. It's worth having a look at the article. As I say, I didn't learn anything new. The figures make for interesting reading, and it's very, very clear that there are some very good companies making some fairly decent money out there. Scott, thanks for coming back to me. Let's have a look. We're running right about 8 to 10%. Fear is we're down to 5% in the near future. It's interesting. I don't know what the standard differential between the US and the UK is, but you're worried about falling to a level where the top 20 of the UK are already at, which that's a worrying thing, I think, as we go forward. And obviously, one of the things that because David Taylor, who wrote the article for Construction Index, he's not psychic. What this doesn't make any allowance for is COVID-19 and the ensuing lockdown. I keep banging the drum because I do believe there will be a lot of work to be had when we come out the other end, if we're allowed to work in a sensible way, if we can get back in a timely fashion. There is work out there. We've already seen that. There's billions of pounds worth of work that's waiting to be done. But can it be done profitably? Can we go back and actually start to make some money out of this? And again, going back to David's article, he's made no allowance for the COVID crisis. Brexit put the fear of God into people, and that's been reflected very, very clearly in the figures that the Construction Index have compiled. What will the COVID-19 crisis do? My guess is we'll lose, all told, probably about 3 months. So even if we were firing on all cylinders, the figures for 2020 will be down by a quarter, possibly more. So it will be interesting to see how all this pans out. Now, where are we today? It is, let me just check. It is Tuesday today. So just a very quick reminder, we've got the Demolition Social Club, which I'm calling Demolition Social Club 3, The Revenge. We're doing that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Maybe we can have a chat about this. Maybe we can have a chat about profit margins and the differential between here and other parts of the world, and the fact that the industry is very, very skewed in favor of certainly the top 10, possibly the top 20 or 30 as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that if you're available at 7 p.m. tomorrow. But also we've got a bit of a bonus tonight. I'm doing a live stream with a company called Innate, and that's INEIGHT, who do profit management or project management software and that kind of thing. Their press release that they sent me through reckons that they can help overcome project delays. So I've got one of their guys from the States coming on at 5 p.m. UK time today. So if you're around and you fancy a bit more early evening viewing, we'd love to have you there. You can ask questions in the comments, as you can always here. So as I say, we'd love to have you here. Is there anything else? I don't think there is. We will be back. We're back again at 5 tonight. We'll be back again at 3 tomorrow. We'll be back again at 7 tomorrow as well. So you're really going to be sick of the sight of my face if you're not already. In the meantime, I'm going to let you get back to whatever it was you were doing before I so rudely interrupted you. As always, look after yourselves, look after your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Stay safe, look after each other, and I will see you again at same place, same time tomorrow. All the very best. Cheers now.